Welcome back, spirits and souls, to my Redwood apocalyptic playthrough of Vintage Story. My farm is coming along quite nicely. My bees and chickens are doing especially well. I do still have the occasional unwelcome guest in the cellar, but that is a problem I can easily solve with my shiny new Falx blade. Another problem I intend to fix is this crooked fence. It's been bothering me for some time now, and I will not wait a moment longer to move all these posts. The orchard is coming along nicely as well, although I do wish to expand it a bit further. However, that task will have to wait. I have far more important things to take care of. For starters, I need to make even more bronze ingots and tools. I know where at least some iron is located, but until I can make fire clay and a bloomery, there is little point in digging it up. With the warm weather, I will soon need to tend to my garden. I can't yet replace all the soil with better dirt, but I can get ready to plant a new set of crops. Although with all the food I currently have, I don't think I'll need more anytime soon. What I do need is leather. Thankfully, the first batch has just finished soaking in the strong tannin, and the next batch is ready to be processed. Now, there are a lot of options for how to use this leather. I can make an apron, gloves, or even a bow. In fact, I just remembered I wanted a hunting bow. I just need to saw a couple logs and then leave the bow stave on the tool rack to dry. By then, the next batch of leather should be ready. Until then, I think I will focus on improving my inventory. Leather backpacks have so much more space than the cloth sacks. Sadly, I only have enough for one. I will have to do a great deal more hunting before I can make more. But first, my bronze is ready. I only have 4 ingot molds, so after examining my tools, I decided to use the remaining bronze on a shovel. While all of that cooled, I made several flint axes so I could chop down a great number of trees, starting with a redwood I had planted ages ago. I wanted to test how effective a bronze axe would compare to flint. It was very effective. In fact, the large redwood fell surprisingly quickly, and the axe still had more than half its durability. If collecting wood with bronze tools is that fast, it might be worth using the better material after all. Of course, I would still use the flint axes for turning logs into firewood. That process was already fast, and I saw no reason to waste a good bronze axe on making firewood. I chopped down another redwood, and this time the bronze axe lost a great deal more of its durability. At best, I could get 3 redwoods worth of material with 1 bronze axe. Thanks to the better tools, it felt like the coal pit was filling up considerably faster than before. By now, my new shovel was ready to go. I also had a lovely collection of seeds and far too many logs. I wanted to put the rest of the firewood in the coal pit, but it was growing dark, and too many trespassers were wandering the property, no thanks to a rift that had opened over my fields. I managed to take out a couple of them before I could finally return to the coal pit, except one of the nasty buggers snuck up on me while I was placing firewood. I dealt with it swiftly and then returned to my treehouse. Perhaps in the morning the rift would be gone. In the meanwhile, I knew that sleep would drain my hunger to recover my health, which meant I would need food in the morning. Thankfully, I had some eggs and onions in my pockets. So I started an omelet over the fire. I decided to place the old cloth sack on the floor. I didn't need it anymore, but it might still be useful one day. Or, at the very least, it was interesting decoration. In the meanwhile, I needed to rest and recover. Food does not keep cooking while you sleep, so I still had to wait a bit before I could have any breakfast. The farm still had a great number of unwelcome intruders, and that blasted rift was still wide open over my fields. I managed to take out the ones I could see, but until the rift disappeared, they would keep coming back. I still needed to harvest my crops, so I approached with caution and worked quickly. With the flax harvested, I was able to make more cloth, which I would soon need in plenty. In the meanwhile, it was time to start planting again. I started with rye in the fresh, high-quality soil. Rye would not only be useful for making dough for bread and pies, it would also be useful for making alcohol. Sadly, I only had a few seeds, so I was limited in how much I could plant. I also needed to improve the water sources around the farm. Manually watering the crops was not ideal in the long term, but that would have to wait until the rift was gone. In the meanwhile, I still planned to collect an absurd amount of food. Some time ago, I had planted tree seeds nearby, and now they were ready to harvest. First, however, I needed to use the shears to strip away the leaves and branches, especially on the walnut tree. Why? Because the shears would increase the chance of walnuts dropping, and walnuts are food. I think they can be used in a recipe or two, but I intend to collect many more before I find out. Naturally, walnut trees are quite tall, as are most trees. This means to get all the leaves, I needed to stack the ladder high enough to reach the uppermost branches. I jumped from the ladder into the tree and proceeded to snip away at every branch. By the end, I managed to collect 7 walnuts in total. It wasn't a lot, but if I planted them, I would be able to collect many more. I also removed a few leaves of the oak tree, though not as many since all they give are acorns. Still, I easily got 6 acorns, and the oak wood is very nice. I did not bother shearing the leaves of the maple tree, since I have no interest in growing more maple wood. Not unless they add maple syrup to the game. And pancakes. Even better would be if we could smelt a waffle iron and make waffles. I haven't had a good waffle in ages. And no, Eggos do not count as waffles. Neither the taste nor the texture is the same. But enough about waffles. I still intend to collect an absurd amount of wood so I can see if a round coal pit really works. Pockets full, I returned to the hut only to be bluntly reminded that I had not yet solved my storage issue. In truth, I needed a larger storage room, perhaps even a series of rooms for various materials. Naturally, such an endeavor would take time and resources. Until then, I would make do with a few extra crates for all the wood I was collecting. I just had to move a few items before I could place them. I had more oak logs than any other, so I put them in an oak crate next to the chests. This cleared up enough room to put all the other logs, although I knew some of them would need crates of their own soon. I also made a crate for the sticks, since I had a rather large collection of them at this point. By now it was very dark, but not quite late enough to sleep. Instead, I turned the maple logs into firewood before finally going to bed. It was still dark when I returned to the coal pit, but not so dark to make me worried about drifters or Bowthorn. Thankfully, that awful rift had finally disappeared, and I could freely tend to my fields without worry. Quite a bit of flax was ready to harvest, which meant I could make plenty more cloth. At this rate, I would have no problem making windmills as well as new clothes. I checked on my food stores and grabbed some ingredients to make more stew. Once again, I lamented my lack of meat. The only protein in my diet had been the occasional egg. Still, as much as I wished to improve my meal options, I wanted to collect considerably more wood first. Admittedly, I was growing tired of chopping so many trees. So long as I only collected from the little ones, it would take far too long to collect enough to fill the coal pit. I decided to take a break and check on the bow stave. It wasn't finished drying, but it could still be sawed into a recurve bow. I probably should have checked which was better before I did this, or even checked if I could make it in the first place, but I didn't. So I would later learn that I couldn't even use a recurve bow. In the meanwhile, I left it to dry before I would realize this. I fed my animals again, a task which is truly nonstop, or will be as long as I'm trying to advance the generations. I didn't feel like bringing the remaining grain all the way to the cellar, so I threw it in with the clay and wax before staring at my wood storage. I planned to collect more wood, enough for several future builds, which meant this chest would not be enough to hold it all. So I made a crate of walnut for the walnut wood, and noted how little walnut wood I actually had. What I did have were several walnuts, which I carefully planted several blocks from each other to maximize the amount of leaves that would eventually drop more walnuts. I then chopped down the mass of oak trees nearby, not just because I wanted the oak wood, but also because I wanted more room to plant the remaining walnuts. I then found a hole in the ground, out of which crawled a deep drifter, which I slaughtered with my falx blade. Its pockets were empty, so I returned to the hut to store the wood I had gathered. Next, I grabbed my shears and stared out across the swamp. I could see the bare branches of giant redwood I had attempted to strip for seeds. I returned to the hut and quickly checked the handbook for how to craft a raft. I had made at least one, if not two, already, but I had misplaced it each time. Surely this time I would not lose it. Excitedly, I hopped onto the raft, only to realize it was not moving. I had accidentally set it on the land, and after fixing the issue, I was finally able to row across the water. I took a moment to collect cattails, break my only knife, make a new knife, and then make a basket to place on the raft. The dirt I had previously used to climb the tree was still there, but by now I had learned the value of a good ladder. I proceeded to trim the branches, a task which was much easier with the shears than the axe. Unfortunately, I had set out much too late, and the sun was already getting low in the sky. Still, the shears made quick work of the leaves. Surely I could finish at least one tree. I managed to collect all the sticks, and since it wasn't too dark yet, I risked chopping down the tree itself. Just as my axe broke and a rain of logs and branches fell around me, I saw the warning for the imminent temporal storm. Somehow I'd missed the initial warning, and now I had no time to collect the materials around me. I could only hurry across the water and hope everything was still there when I returned. The moment my feet hit dry land, the storm began. I hurried to the cellar and into the safety pen. I watched as the walls melted and bowthorns spawned nearby. If only my bow had been ready, I could turn my safety area into a place to duck out of sight while shooting at any intruder through carefully placed openings. But that would have to wait. Time passed, and the storm finally ended. I emerged from the pen and attacked the Bowtorn. I managed to defeat both of them, but took damage in the process. At least one of them had a rusty gear for my trouble. It was still night outside, so I laid in my sleep roll and waited for the sun to rise. I ate a quick breakfast and then emptied the rot from my fruit chest and grabbed some vegetables to chomp on. I then emptied the sticks from my pockets and hurried back to the redwood. Sadly, all the freshly chopped wood had despawned. I regretted not grabbing it while I could. But what's done is done, and I had more to do. Starting with missing this jump to the floating dirt and taking a good deal of fall damage. I opted to climb the tree with ladders instead. I then realized I'd forgotten to bring any axes and only had enough flint to make a single axe head. In short, I was not at all prepared for breaking the floating dirt blocks or chopping down any more trees. I took even more fall damage before deciding to go back across the water and make proper preparations. I once again smelted some bronze and noted that I would soon need more copper. While the ores melted, I topped off the rot in one compost barrel and then made 2 more for the remaining rot in my pocket. I took a few moments to empty my pockets of extra materials before pulling the axe clay mold from the rack. I collected eggs to store in the cellar and then poured the molten bronze into the axe, shovel, and ingot molds. It had been a while since I checked my crops, so I did a walkthrough and noted that many were low moisture. I really did need to better place the water sources, but that could wait until another time. For now, I cleared the weeds and placed more high-quality soil. I then inspected my seeds before selecting a few to plant. By now, I was certain I could grow crops all year round. Not that I needed to grow them all the time, but by picking which ones tolerated heat versus cold, I could grow a variety in my fields. For now, I focused on flax, cabbage, and amaranth. It wasn't long before the bronze was cool and I once again had a sturdy axe for chopping trees. Not that it would last very long against the redwoods. Still, what I had should be enough to gather the materials I needed. My goal was to have a workshop and larger storage area. I also needed a windmill and a bakery, each of which would take time. But first, I had more redwoods to chop down. This time, I trimmed away at the branches of a redwood closer to my base. The sky grew red as I sheared. In the end, I collected many sticks, but no seeds. Even with the shears, the redwoods hardly dropped any. I used my torch to find my way home in the dark, slept through the night, and returned to finish off the last few branches of the tree before chopping the rest of it down. I did a bit of digging around a nearby ruin and found a clay vessel, but not much else. On returning home, I made a new crate of redwood and chose to store the regular redwood logs, but not the quarter logs, which I kept in the chest. I falxed a new drifter in the cellar before grabbing some vegetables for stew. I then added more firewood to the coal pit, which was nearly halfway full. If I focused entirely on chopping down redwoods, it would be completely full in no time. Instead, I went berry picking while it rained. I collected every single cranberry in my fields and then placed them in the fruit press and watched the juices squelch into the bucket below, which I then emptied into a barrel in the cellar. I did this again except I forgot to place the bucket, and so the juices dripped all over the floor instead. Such a waste. I did not forget the bucket the next 4 times. Once the barrel was full, I sealed it tight. In 7 days, the juice would turn into wine. Delicious, mildly toxic wine. Even after all the squeezing, I still had plenty of cranberries remaining. I would either eat them, or they would become compost. As for the berry mash, that went straight to the pigs and the goats. The remaining mash I stored in the cellar. I then proceeded to collect all the red currant berries. Just like with the cranberries, I put them in the press and poured the juice into a barrel until it was full. That too was sealed to be made into wine. The remaining berries and mash were stored in the berry chest until needed. While checking my bees, I remembered I had extra fruit tree cuttings and decided to make a reed chest to store them next to the grove. I planned to collect more cuttings as backups eventually. Before any of that, I needed to update the game to 1.21.7. I don't remember what changes are in this update, but I did see something about eventually being able to fish and put more stuff on the shelves. I gave the shelf thing a try, and nothing happened, so I suppose that'll be a later update. For now, I need jugs. I'm not sure how many jugs, but I do know it will take far longer than I care to spend on clay forming. I also eventually want different colored jugs, but to make that, I will need a special kind of brick and a giant kiln thing. I think it was a beehive something or other. I just know it's the size of a small building. Oh well. I suppose making clay vessels is a good way to wait for the sun to rise. I made 8 jugs before examining what other stuff I could make in the handbook. I would eventually need to make a condenser and boiler to make stronger spirits, which I believe can be used to make better bandages. But that requires more material than I am willing to spend, at least until I get more copper. By now, the next generation of chicks had hatched. Generation 3. I believe I was averaging a new generation every season. And most animals are fully tamed by Generation 10, which means I was about 2 in-game years from having fully tamed chickens. While I ponder my animal husbandry, I put the clay jugs in the pit kiln and readied them to be fired. At least, I would have if I wasn't distracted by the sudden need to go hunting. I came across a herd of goats and missed every single one while they fled. I then came across a wild boar, which also fled, but in doing so led me to a second boar. I was only able to successfully hunt one of them, at least until I searched for the other and finished it off as well. Since the day was still young, I decided to check my map for potential resources and then gather some mushrooms from the forest. I checked the yellow apple tree for branches I could turn into cuttings, but none had grown. Perhaps it was too early in the year. I attempted to explore a cave and ended up fighting a shiver. I won, but lost over half my health. I continued to explore and paused to watch lightning in the distance. I remembered finding ruins when I first began my adventure. Specifically, I remembered seeing useful items in those ruins, and had always intended to return. Today, I did exactly that. I dug up some bony soil, broke a clay vessel, and kept digging in case there was a hidden room or more bony soil. Soon, it got dark. I remembered a small hideout I had made for my first night and hoped it was nearby. It was, but there was also plenty of time before it truly got dark, so I set out again. I tried to hunt another pig and somehow succeeded, even in the darkness. By now, I needed a torch. I came across another apple tree, this one with branches for cutting, and took what I could. I then continued south with the goal of staying with a trader located near the ruins. I found the trader, but he didn't have a bed. So I took the risk and placed my bedroll out in the open. I woke to the sound of wild goats and a blood-red sky. It was still early, but maybe I could explore the ruins anyway. A bit of digging revealed bony soil. Then a drifter came calling. I took it out, only to realize a portal was nearby. It was spitting out unpleasant monsters on all sides. I tried to fight, but there were too many. I barely had time to grab the torch holder before I was forced to flee. I'm sure the ruins had more to uncover, but for now it was too dangerous to continue. On my way home, I happened upon copper nuggets and remembered that barren plains were the best places to find ore, since the lack of plants made it easy to see surface deposits. I searched the area but found nothing else. Plus, my hunger and health were far too low. At least I could placate my hunger with wild berries. By a stroke of luck, I came across a treasure hunter. A necessary find for advancing the more dangerous parts of this game. I would need better weapons and armor for that stage, but at least I knew where to get the next clue. I grabbed more berry bushes and continued the journey home. I needed to cook the meat I had collected before it spoiled, so I grabbed onions, threw the hides in the lime water, and collected firewood. A little meat, a little onion, and a little mushroom for a delightful, filling meal. While it cooked, I placed the torch holder in the storage hut and emptied my pockets for the remaining finds, keeping just enough to make more stew. I also collected the leather from the barrel and made a new backpack. I then remembered I'd clay jugs that needed to be fired. Somehow, I had completely forgotten about them. I filled the pit kilns with grass before remembering I had extra crock pots in the treehouse. So I went to collect them so I would have somewhere to put all the meat stew I could now make. I then grabbed some sticks to put in the pit kiln and some stew, and then went to the orchard to plant the yellow apple cuttings I had collected. As I cleared the land and placed the cuttings, I forgot all about the firewood that still needed to go in the pit kilns. I did add more firewood to the cooking fire and started a third pot of stew before wandering around a bit and wondering what task I should do next. I decided to work on expanding the orchard. I had no idea how many fruit trees I would eventually find, so I planned to make lots of room just in case. The last stew pot was done, so I put it in the storage hut for later. I also put away the clay molds, since I would not need them for at least a little while. By now night was falling, so I once again went to bed. In the early morning light, I watched a shiver struggle to pull itself out of the water before disappearing over the hill. I waited until it was out of sight before crossing to the farm. To my absolute delight, I found a new kid among the goats. This one was female, meaning I would soon have the necessary goats to breed the next generation. Granted, it would still be several in-game years before they were fully tamed, but I was now one step closer. My pigs, however, had yet to produce any offspring. Still, I had to make sure all of them were fed. In truth, I probably didn't need to feed the pigs, but all that fruit mash was just going to rot if I didn't give it to someone. In the meanwhile, at least all the rain meant I didn't have to water my crops. What I did need was to collect honey from my hives. The first skep I broke was full of angry bees, as was the second one. In real life, you can fix an aggressive beehive by replacing the queen with one that had a better temperament, after which it takes about 6 weeks for all the daughters of the old queen to live their full life and be replaced by the daughters of the new queen. In Vintage Story, it's a gamble. After filling my pockets with sticky honey, I grabbed my scythes to clear the weeds from my fields. I then accidentally harvested a crop that wasn't ready and had to replant it. Maybe I'll clear the weeds by hand going forward. In the meanwhile, I can restock on cattails. I put my scythe away and added harvested food to the cellar before putting the cattails into the skep material basket. I collected the eggs before deciding it would be good to have a second hen box. Not because I plan to have more than one hen anytime soon, but because it would be easier to collect eggs if they all went in a box, rather than having a few randomly on the ground. I also decided to expand the chicken pen. I should probably also consider making a proper hen house, but that could wait for another day. There were a lot of things I needed to do, which would have to wait for another day. First, I wanted to give something a try. That something was using the fruit press to squeeze honey out of the honeycomb. And it worked like a charm. I also wanted to take my raft across the swamp to gather more redwood, but with the sun starting to set, that seemed like a bad idea. It was at this point I finally remembered the pit kilns needed firewood. I decided to use the last bit of daylight to weed the fields, only to be attacked by an especially aggressive shiver. Try as I might, I struggled to land a hit and was forced to retreat into the hut. While I waited, I checked on the hides in the lime water and scraped them down for the weak tannin. Moans and groans just outside convinced me that spending the night in the cellar might be the best choice, so I decided to spend my time making additional clay jugs. I made almost 8 before running out of clay and deciding to go to bed. I got more clay and finished the task in the morning. In the faint morning light, I tried to place the jugs in the pit kilns, but took an arrow to the head instead. Once again, my day began with violence. Something was throwing rocks at me, but I couldn't pinpoint the direction. So I decided to run just far enough away for the rock thrower to disappear by the time I returned. This time I did not get distracted while setting up the pit kilns. Since the day was still early, I would have plenty of time to collect wood. So I did. I paddled my raft across the swamp and used my ladders to remove that last annoying bit of flying dirt. I then quickly chopped down the remainder of the redwood. I still had plenty of room in my pockets, so I started chopping another one. To my surprise, the whole thing fit in my pocket, with room to spare. I decided to gather flint so I could make more axes. As I wandered farther away, I found a boar worth hunting, and, since I was already nearby, I decided to check the hunter's pit I had once used to catch deer, and the peach tree where I collected branches. Neither the pit nor the tree had anything worth collecting. I continued to wander until I came across the ruins from ages ago. They still had some unbroken vessels, but my pockets were too full to take anything. I found even more ruins right by a new trader. This one sold furniture. I marked both on my map. I continued deeper and deeper into the woods until I found even more ruins. This one littered with bony soil. My pockets were full, but they had just enough room for that soil full of bones. To my surprise, a secret room lay beneath the ruins. This room was full of cracked vessels and other treasures. I regretted coming here with full pockets. The next time I explored, I would do so with plenty of space to collect valuable finds. With night falling, I had no choice but to clear some space in the ruins to sleep. It was still dark when I woke. I passed the time digging out one side of the secret room so I could maybe place a few items. I made just enough space to pick up a copper pickaxe and a bronze knife. Although I accidentally dropped the knife and had to re-empty my pockets to pick it up again. I really wanted the torch holder on the wall, so I risked breaking another vessel. It dropped more copper tools, which I couldn't leave behind. I also discovered a vessel I could just open. It had 7 rusty gears inside. I swapped the gears for a broken spear and marked the ruins on my map. There were too many treasures to collect, so I decided to come back later, even if it meant leaving behind the torch holder. By now, I had been away for far too long. I hurried home in the pouring rain. I put the new tools on the rack with the others. I then grabbed some vegetables so I could cook more stew. I harvested even more flax from the garden. I wasn't sure exactly how much I would need for a windmill, but I had to be close by now. As I checked on my hogs, I realized something was wrong with their food. It had gone rotten. I guess 2 pigs can only eat so much mash. By now I had spent a great deal of time doing all sorts of tasks. It was time to wrap things up, so I planted a few sunflowers and turned the redwood into firewood. I filled the coal pit until it was nearly halfway full. If I were to do a rough estimate, I think I would need another 12 or so redwoods to fill the rest of the coal pit. A colossal task that would have to wait for next time. I really needed a list, or some other means of tracking all the things I wanted to do. I think for next time, I will keep it simple, finish filling the coal pit, and build the smithing workshop. The last thing I did was check the trees in my grove. As I did, I realized I had accidentally planted a yellow apple tree among the pink apple trees. It had taken root, which meant I should at least wait until it grew big enough to provide several cuttings before replacing it. Meanwhile, one of my peach cuttings had died. I was starting to think the 40% chance of survival was a load of malarkey. The peach cuttings died way more often than the apple trees. This was why I needed a lot of extras. And that is where I will end. Thank you for watching, everyone. And remember, take care of yourself.